Hey everybody, Captain B-Nard here with your BHDL3, or as some might say, BHDL3, Week 7 recap and Week 8 preview. We're going to go ahead and just dive right into this by taking a closer look at our opponent for this week. And that, of course, was the Leaf Agents coached by Scorpion. Scorpion is a very strong competitive battler and a very, shall we say, thorough draft leaguer. And so this is actually our third encounter here on Scarlet and Violet. And on the screen right now, you can see a snapshot of his team this season. And so looking at this roster top to bottom, the Pokemon I was expecting him to bring to this game 100% were the Iron Valiant, the Hisuian Samurott, the Torterra, the Pheasantipity, and the Hisuian Typhlosion. So I actually thought there was a great chance that all five of those Pokemon would show up to this game. Now, as for the sixth slot, I thought there was a pretty good shot that he was going to bring one of the Iron Crown, the Cyclizar, the Thunderous Therian, or the Bronzong. And then there was only one Pokemon on his squad that I thought had no shot of showing up to this game. That was the Morgrim, simply because it is a Morgrim. Having said that, we're going to go ahead and throw it over to the team preview screen to see what he actually decided to bring to the game. So here you can see the six Pokemon that he brought to the match on the right-hand side, the six Pokemon that I brought on the left. And so, as you can see, he did decide to bring the Torterra, the Iron Crown, the Hisuian Samurott, the Hisuian Typhlosion, the Pheasantipity, and, of course, the Iron Valiant. So pretty much everything that I was expecting him to bring. Now, whether or not I could do anything about that was a different story. But the only real surprise here, or at least a little bit of one, was that he did not bring the Thunderous Therian. But other than that, like I said, pretty much everything I thought would come to this match. So looking at my team for the game here, I decided to bring the Arcanine, Scizor, Mesprit, Gudra, Alolan, Ninetales, and of course the Sneasler. Once again, these were just the six Pokemon that I thought had the best odds of doing something against his team. I will say, and I've probably said it before, and I will say it again, I did have a very difficult time prepping for this team. So there were a couple other Pokemon that I had considered bringing to this match, but these were the six that I eventually settled on. Having said that, we're going to go ahead and keep on moving by taking a look at what actually happened in the game. So, for those of you who have seen the game already, this will be no surprise, but unfortunately, we did end up losing this game 5-0. It was not a particularly close or even a particularly good match, unfortunately. It was just a lot of positioning in the early goings of the game, and unfortunately, I kind of found myself on the wrong end of the positioning, and then just kind of due to matchups, there wasn't really much I could do to get myself out of that situation. So we do take a pretty rough, pretty disappointing loss this week, our first of the season, actually. And since we did lose, I would go ahead and name the game LVP. And after very little thought about this, I decided that the game LVP had to be myself, Captain B-Nard, as you can see on the screen here. I didn't want to give it to a Pokemon for a couple of reasons that we'll get into on the next screen here. But I just felt like none of the Pokemon on my team really dropped the ball or really underperformed this week. It was really me that dropped the ball and underperformed in this game. And I will get into much more detail about that on the next screen. Which is going to, of course, be our key takeaways from the match. And so, my key takeaways from this game are going to be number one, I thought that this was kind of a bad match on paper for me. And so, when I look at my opponent's roster top to bottom, when I look at my roster top to bottom, unfortunately, a lot of the Pokemon that he has, especially his higher level Pokemon, his top point value Pokemon, his Terra Captains even seem to match up pretty well against my team. But that kind of goes double for the squads that we actually brought to the game. So Despite the fact that I predicted pretty much the entire squad that he would bring to this game, I really didn't come up with a whole lot that I could do to try and counter that or stop that. Which kind of leads me into the next key takeaway, which is I feel like I prepped for this game pretty poorly as well. I feel like I played pretty poorly in this game. Um, so from the prep side, I just want to let you guys know that it was not for lack of trying that I felt like I prepped for this game pretty badly, because trust me when I say I did spend a lot of time thinking about what I wanted to bring to this game and how I wanted to kind of tackle this game. Um, and to be completely honest with you guys, for the most part, I just kind of came up empty. Was just looking at the Pokemon that I had, looking at the Pokemon he had, and just thinking, like, how do I break through this team? Like, how do I get momentum against this team? And I just didn't really have too many good ideas as to how to do that, because my more premier Pokemon on my team, stuff like the Sneasler, stuff like the Alola Ninetales, stuff like the Scissor, just didn't seem like it really did a whole lot against his team. And it was like I said, kind of feeding back to the first point, seemed like a pretty bad match on paper for me. And despite thinking about it a lot, I just couldn't really come up with a lot of good ideas to try and counteract this team. Um, so yeah, I would say that that definitely was a poor prep on my side, but not for lack of time or lack of trying. Now, I will say I do wish I had a little more time to test, because I usually do a little bit of testing with these teams before I have the games. Although, um, I didn't really get too much of a chance to do much testing. Although I kind of don't know if that would have made much of a difference. But yeah, that's just kind of where that was. But additionally, I also felt like I played the game pretty poorly. I feel like there were a lot of predictions that I just kind of got wrong. I think I got off to a bad start in the game early by losing a couple of Mons pretty early, by letting him hazard stack without consequence pretty early. And I just kind of found myself in a vicious cycle of just trying to gain momentum, but just basically getting hazard chipped and pivoted on his side. And after I kind of caught myself in that vicious cycle, there wasn't really much I could do to get out of it. um, and I feel like if I had played maybe the early goings of the game a little bit better, and had I prepped a little bit better, it could have been a different story. But unfortunately, that was not the case. But yeah, that's going to go ahead and lead us to our next point here, which is going to be some negative hacks. So there were really a couple of turns in particular in the early going of the game that kind of set us off on a bad path early, as I said. And those would be, there was a specific turn where I had my Gudra in against his Hisuian Typhlosion, and so I decided to go ahead and Terra, and then hit him with a Terra Blast ground, which I did do. And unfortunately, he gets like the 1 HP survive on the Hisuian Typhlosion, which was extremely unfortunate, because that forces me to switch with the Gudra or lose the Gudra next turn. So yeah, getting the I think believe that was a roll that he survived that attack there. So that was pretty unfortunate for me, that happened, because then I decided to mitigate the damage once I realized it was a physical Hisuian Typhlosion by going ahead and switching into my Arcanine to try and save the Gudra, get the Intimidate to cut his attack. Unfortunately, he does read that and go for the Earthquake, and unfortunately for me, he ends up getting a crit, which is the other bit of hacks that takes the Arcanine out without it being able to do anything. So those kind of back-to-back turns really set me down a pretty bad path that led to a pretty bad defeat on my side. Now, I'm not going to say that those things 100% cost me the match, and if not for those things, I could have won. I'm not going to say that at all, because I don't think that was the case. But that certainly was a big detriment to me early game. That, as I said, kind of set me down a path that led to defeat at that point in the game. So, so that was unfortunate, but it just kind of was what it was. And I will say, despite all of this, the last thing I will try to note on a positive note is that this is really only the first setback for the Philadelphia Pidgeys this season. As I mentioned, this is actually our first loss here in the BHDL3. So we were 6-0 undefeated prior to this game. So despite the fact that this game was a huge disappointment for me, it was like I said, not a very good game or a very close game. Pretty disappointing game, pretty disappointing week for all the aforementioned reasons. We still have to stay positive by reminding ourselves that we are still in a really solid position here in the BHDL3, having a 6-1 record. Not being the number one, but actually the number two seed overall still at this point, which is pretty impressive. And also, most importantly, having a guaranteed spot in the BHDL3 playoffs. So that is something positive to focus on, despite the disappointment of this week. So, having said all of that, that's going to go ahead and feed us into actually taking a closer look at the current standings in the BHDL3 and what every team's playoff prospects are. So here you can see a full list top to bottom of the current standings in the BHDL3 post week 7 for all 16 of the teams. And so, as I had mentioned, we did fall from our number one spot here that we had been holding on to for several weeks, down to number two. But as I said, that's okay. We are still in a very solid position here in the BHDL3. So I want to go over where all the teams stand in a little more detail than I did last time, because last time it was post week 5. We didn't really have enough information to make concrete statements about what was going to happen. Now we actually have a lot more information. So I'm going to go ahead and do just that. So basically, the way I see this list as it breaks down is you essentially have three groups of teams. You have the teams that are already locked in for playoffs, you have the teams that are mathematically eliminated from making playoffs, and you have the teams that are still fighting for a playoff spot and their various states. So, I'm not going to spend too much time on the first two groups because those are self-explanatory. I'm going to spend most of my time on the teams that are still fighting for that playoff spot. Um, but I do want to get the other two groups out of the way first. So obviously, the first group of coaches and teams are going to be the group that are guaranteed locked into playoffs, and that is going to include obviously the top three teams being coached by Scorpion, myself, and Raymond, all with 6-1 records, high differentials. Those teams are mathematically guaranteed to make playoffs, even if we were to lose the last 2 weeks 6-0. That would still leave us in playoff contention due to our records. So yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory. Another team that is actually locked into playoffs at this point as well is going to be the number 4 team, Emerald Miner. There, due to the fact that he has a very high differential and a 5-2 record. I believe he's actually also going to be getting a forfeit victory in Week 8 due to his opponent deciding that he, due to his poor record, is not going to be playing his last 2 weeks. But even despite that forfeit victory, I believe Emerald Miner is mathematically locked in to playoffs as well, just due to his 5-2 record and high differential. So yeah, that's that. Now on the flip side of the list, there are some teams that are mathematically eliminated from playoff contention, meaning even if they were to win their last 2 weeks 6-0 victories, it still would not be enough to get them into playoff contention. And those, unsurprisingly, are going to be the bottom 4 teams there, being coached by Lionel, Stefan, Sneezy Wims, and Caddy. Unfortunately, the season has not gone quite the way that they wanted to, and they are so far behind in terms of victories and differentials, ranging from 2-0 victories on those teams and having pretty high negative differentials that there's really no way they can catch up at this point, unfortunately. But that is just the way that these things go at this point in the season. You really start to see things take shape. And as I said previously, I've been on both ends of the spectrum, so I get it. It just, is what it is. That's the way every competition goes. There have to be people on top and people on bottom, and that's just the way math works. So, um, but having said that, like I said, I really want to focus in more on the teams in the middle of the pack here. So from top to bottom in that middle section, the teams that are still fighting for playoff contention here, the first team I want to zero in on is the best not really's team, sitting in the number 5 position. Now, this coach and this team are at this point, well, not mathematically guaranteed to make playoffs. They're essentially all but locked into playoffs. So what I mean by that is, I crunched the numbers, and basically the only way that this team does not make playoffs in this point is if not only they have to lose their last 2 matches in catastrophic fashion, like getting 5 or 6-0'd in both games, but they also have to have a very specific set of circumstances surrounding the other coaches toward the middle bottom of the pack. They basically would need not only specific coaches to win specific games, but they would need them to win those games by specific numbers too, to make the math work out that they would not make playoffs. That the best not really that is would not make playoffs. So at this point, there's basically no chance that this team does not make playoffs. Although, like I said, there is actually a weird situation where if this team gets like 5 or 6-0 back-to-back weeks, and then some of the other teams toward the middle of the bottom win their games like 5 or 6-0, then they could actually sneak in and take that playoff spot. But like I said, that's extremely unlikely at this point. All the best not really has to do to secure his playoff spot is essentially just not get 5 or 6-0 back-to-back weeks, and then he is going to make it. In a similar but not quite as good situation, then we have the next coach down in the number 6 spot. That is, of course, Biradu, and he is also sitting at a 5-2 record, although with not nearly as strong of a differential, although a very respectable differential as well. And so he's kind of in a similar situation in the sense that he is all but locked into playoffs at this point, although not technically guaranteed. Now, because his differential is not quite as high, there is a little more play there. But again, for Biradu to not make playoffs at this point, essentially he would have to get like 5 or 6-0 back-to-back weeks, and then additionally he would need other coaches, again toward the bottom end of the spectrum, would have to win games like 5 or 6-0 in order for them to swoop in and take his playoff spot. But just by virtue of the fact that he already has 5 wins, it's extremely unlikely that he does not make playoffs in his current state. Although, as I said, he has a little bit less of a cushion to work with than the best as far as getting that playoff spot. Now, when it comes to the last 2 playoff spots, that's where things get really interesting, because we have in the number 7 seed, we have Anastasia, who is sitting at a 4-3 record with a +10 differential, so very high differential given that she has almost an equal amount of wins and losses. And then sitting directly below that, the Pokemaster with the same 4-3 record, but only a +2 differential. So as far as Anastasia is concerned in this situation, basically she is going to need to win at least one of her last 2 matches in order to qualify for playoffs. But if she can win one of those last 2 matches, I think regardless of how big she wins or loses those games, I think she will definitely get into playoffs, simply because she already has that pretty massive +10 differential to work with. So I think that all she really needs to do is earn even a narrow victory in one of those last 2 weeks, and then she will secure a playoff spot guaranteed, even if she loses the other week in tremendous fashion. Now, as far as Pokemaster 88 is concerned, he is in a little bit more of a tough situation, just due to the fact that he doesn't have a very high differential. So he is certainly going to win at least one, if not both of those final 2 weeks in order to make it, simply because the differential is not super high. But additionally, he could also make it in if some of those other coaches sitting right below him actually end up losing. That could kind of lock him in as well, since he does have the a 1 game advantage over the rest of those teams. So, but yeah, he's definitely on the razor's edge at this point. If he takes like a catastrophic loss, like a big 5-0 or 6-0 loss in one of those weeks, even if he wins the other week, that could actually knock him out of contention, depending on how good those other teams below him end up doing. And so that kind of brings us to looking at the true razor's edge of the playoffs here, which are going to be the four teams below him. So those are going to be RK Niner, Brandon P, Lazy Boy, and Rolder. So all four of those coaches are currently sitting at a 3-4 record with varying differentials. Honestly, the best of which is RK Niner. Um, so basically, what these teams need to do to try and secure a playoff win, specifically RK Niner, is they really have to win both of those last two games. And then, in the case of the coaches that are a little farther down in differential, those being the Brandon P, Lazy Boy, and Rolder, those coaches actually need to win their games by pretty wide margins in order to make up that big differential that they have, or big negative differential that they currently have. Um, but if RK9er, as far as he's concerned, because he has a little bit better of a differential, if he wins both of his last two games, I think he actually does guarantee himself a playoff spot because I believe one of his last two games is actually against Pokemaster, I believe in week 9, the final week. So there's a very good shot that that game actually is just a straight up whoever wins gets in playoffs and whoever loses doesn't scenario. So yeah, that's going to be a pretty exciting one to watch there. But yeah, as far as those other teams are concerned, like I said, they do still have a chance. But not only do they have to win big, those teams, those latter three teams, Brandon P, Lazy Boy, and Rolder, they're not only going to need to score big victories in order to have a shot at playoffs, but they're also going to need specific teams to lose. Like they're really going to need teams like Biridu, Anastasia, or Pokemaster to lose their games in order to try and get in, and not only lose their games, but in certain situations, like try to like lose their games in spectacular fashion in order to try and sneak in and take their playoff spots. But that's just kind of how I see the playoff position as it currently stands at this point. Obviously, I wish good luck to everyone in trying to make their final playoff push or I should say, these next 2 weeks here. And yeah, obviously, I will also say, as far as my own part is concerned, just because we're locked into playoffs doesn't mean that we're going to stop fighting or stop trying, because at this point, positioning is what we're going to be fighting for. And so what I mean by that is when we do cut to playoffs, obviously we all know the way it works, where the coach in the number 1 position plays the coach in the number 8 position in the quarterfinals. Number 2 plays number 7, number 3 plays number 6, and number 4 plays number 5. So where you are, obviously the higher up you are in that order means that you're going to be able to play a coach that has a lower record, which could in most cases be quite beneficial for you. Although obviously that's not a guarantee that you'll win. But having a higher seed means that you're going to play a coach with a worse record, so that is definitely what you want to fight for. And that's what we're fighting for. So, having said all that, that is going to go ahead and bring us to our Week 8 game and our Week 8 opponent. And that, of course, is going to be the ABCDEFG slash Atacama Tyrannitars, coached by Viridu, also known as Biridu, from the Discord server. Go ahead and join the Discord server. It's the best place to go for Pokemon Scarlet, Violet, Wi-Fi battles right now, in my humble opinion. There is a link in the description down below. Had to do it. It's just there's no choice at this point. It just has to happen. Um, but yeah, so there is our opponent, obviously Biridu. We are no strangers to Biridu, of course. We've had, I believe, 4 prior games on Scarlet and Violet, so this will actually be our 5th game here on Scarlet and Violet, although it's been quite a while since we've played him. And on the screen here, you can see a snapshot of his roster this season, top to bottom. And so obviously he's got a very solid looking team, very threatening looking team on the screen there. A lot of premier high point value threats, as well as solid Pokemon all around here. So once again, it is going to be another solid game, another hotly contested week here in the BHDL3 for us. So yeah, of course, we're just going to try and refocus and stay the course and hopefully kind of bounce back from the week that we had this week. And yeah, just see if we can make it happen. Just try to do our best and hope for the best here. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. Thanks for watching again, everyone. Hope you all enjoyed. Please hit that like button, leave a comment, and/or subscribe if you did enjoy, and stay tuned for more new videos in the future. So that's it, and we'll see you next time.